to the summer of the crossover, and man, we just keep digging into the Ark of the Covenant here, don't we? Those of you who have been with me from the very beginning may remember back in the long ago when my 100th episode was reviewing a little show called Ally McBeal, which was basically LA Law if everyone was as insane as the cast of Night Court. Ally McBeal was a show that just seemed to hit a zeitgeist at the right time. I'd say Fox's heavy promotion of the show had something to do with it, but they also heavily promoted Alan Gregory, and yeah! Really though, big lawyer shows were a major thing by the 1990s. And this wasn't even the first time that David E. Kelley dove into the genre. His first such show was The Practice, which Kelley even admitted was made as a rebuttal to LA Law and its portrayal of the legal profession as being all altruistic. Though I can't help but think he was intentionally trolling Dick Wolf as well. At any rate, it was like a year later, he decided to take the exact same concept, remove all sense of seriousness whatsoever, and have it star a live-action version of Kathy from the comic strips. With Ally McBeal making all the media rounds in that first season, Kelley or someone else involved decided a crossover between both of his shows was just what the lawyer ordered. And much like our previous entry, it would be a two-parter involving an episode on each show. This was a pretty big deal to get it done, as even though David E. Kelley produced both, they were airing on different networks as The Practice aired on ABC. Of course, we never could have guessed at the time that both shows would ultimately end up under the mouse-eared Empire's umbrella, unless you were writing for The Simpsons. But either way, it's time to find out just what happened with the Ally McBeal The Practice crossover. We start with the Ally McBeal episode, The Inmates, which opens with Ally in Georgia dealing with a case about a guy who was pretending to be gay. This is touched on later, but it really has nothing to do with the main plot, so I can just leave it and avoid all of the comments that would come with it. At any rate, Billy soon barges in with an emergency. One of the firm's big clients is being arrested and charged with murdering her husband. All three show up at the crime scene and, well, Ally doesn't take it so well.
There's the killer.
Client, Ally.
This just reminds me of my main disappointment in the show and its main character, because when she doesn't have to act all whiny and petulant, Callista Flockhart could be a damn good comedic actress when she was the joke itself.
I've got blood on me. I'm a suspect. I think, bye.
After the title sequence, we move to the famous co-ed restroom at Cajun Fish, where John is trying to tell Ally that there was no shame in fainting there. I say trying because it turns out he wasn't talking to Ally. What I love about this is we don't even have to see who was really in the stall because John knows immediately.
Elaine.
Yes.
Unacceptable.
John thinks the case is way too big for a young firm like theirs to go alone, and this upsets Billy, who is absolutely all gung-ho to take it. Which does fall along with an earlier episode where Billy was griping about how Cajun Fish only seemed to take ridiculous cases with no real legal impact. But Richard is eventually convinced to defer the case to another firm.
John, who's the big hitter in town on murder?
And thus we arrive at the law offices of Robert Donnell and Associates, where most of the main characters from The Practice are given at least brief appearances, including Lisa Gay Hamilton and Cameron Manheim. But we are mainly introduced to Steve Harris as Eugene Young, and of course, Bobby Donnell as played by Dylan McDermott, aka McDreamy before McDreamy.
Richard Fish, we represent Marie Hansen.
Rebecca filled me in. Why don't you want to do it yourselves?
We would. We're just concerned for our image. You know what the world thinks of criminal attorneys, bottom-feeding scumsuckers. Can't have that image running to the firm. Though on you, it looks good.
You know what? I forgot how goddamn hilarious Richard Fish's completely no-filter mouth was. So many people after this show didn't get how good Greg German was playing the jerk with the heart of gold, and they wrecked his career by casting him as a straight-up villain in movies like Bolt and Talladega Nights. It's really sad. Naturally, every woman at Cajun Fish wants to drop her panties for Bobby here. Especially Allie.
He is so yummy.
But of course, Allie shows restraint compared to Elaine.
Bobby, I had a dream last night that you and I had unprotected sex. I'd tell you more if I knew you better.
Yeah, no matter what role she plays, Jane Krakowski just oozes sex. Now, I will say there are other side plots in each episode, but I'm not going to go into detail on them. In Ally McBeal, there's one where Renee beats this guy up for getting too frisky with her, and she gets arrested for it. It's actually a really compelling story, but it's resolved in the next Ally McBeal episode that has no connection to the crossover, so I'll just suggest that you all go watch it for yourselves. Any side plots in the practice episode, I just don't know the full details on because I never really watched the practice and I don't plan to. The main purpose of the first part is clearly to show off the extreme contrast between the two law firms. And what I really like about it is how, while it does show Cajun Fish as being the inexperienced and maybe even inferior side when it comes to at least practicing criminal law, it doesn't make them the bad guys for it. In fact, Allie and company get the chance to sling their own barbs at Bobby's little firm.
You people have a nice, friendly firm here, lots of bright colors, but if that woman goes down for first degree, it's not going to matter to her whether all her lawyers were able to hold hands.
It does matter that our lawyers work together.
Look, I'm prepared to do that.
Then do it! Either we're a team or we're not.
But the most important plot point comes from when they bring in the defendant's psychiatrist, who brings up the main weapon for her defense, saying that he discovered through hypnosis that she had been Lizzie Borden in a previous life. I will remind you that this took place in season 1 of Ally McBeal, so this was definitely the most insane plot device they'd had so far. By the end of the series, it probably wouldn't even crack the top 20. Thus, we move to the practice episode, Axe Murderer, which just starts with Allie, Billy, Donald, and Eugene in the conference room all together, with no recap of what all went on in the first part. Remember, these shows aired on different networks, and the practice debuted first. So it's very possible there were viewers of this show who didn't watch Allie, even though it was Fox's most hyped show at the time. So anyone who tuned into this episode, having not seen the first part of the crossover, is just going to wonder who these characters are. We just get that they're in with Bobby discussing a murder case and suggesting the defendant was insane because she thought she was Lizzie Borden. It doesn't help that Allie and Billy are the only two characters who cross over in this part. We get a later scene in the episode with Allie and Bobby consulting other legal experts in the Cajun Fish conference room, and none of the other staff are there. Richard, John, and Elaine got robbed on this one. The Lizzie Borden defense gets a monkey wrench thrown in when the prosecution reveals that the defendant was actually having an affair with the psychiatrist. And that's when the Donnell lawyers really start throwing things at the wall, going so far as to suggest that the psychiatrist did it all, that he planted the Lizzie Borden memories in the defendant's head and killed the husband while she was drugged and asleep, all to possibly save himself from his failing practice. And yet, even though it's Eugene that suggests all of this in court, of course, it's Bobby who Allie grills on this afterward.
Why didn't you tell me the plan?
Because I figured you would have a problem, and I couldn't risk you tipping off Peters, that's why.
So if this man isn't already humiliated, he's certainly ruined now. Do you realize that he has 2 small children?
If we get the acquittal, I'm sure you'll stick it on your resume.
You make it sound so good. If I close my eyes, I could almost see you as a hero. Too bad my eyes are open.
Girl, why don't you just admit you want to bonk him and get it over with? That said, I actually do like this confrontation, because it's Allie's chance to strike back after having to hear Bobby go all internet critic on her firm back in the first episode. At any rate, it all leads to this climax. Okay, on one hand, I give Allie a lot of credit for not throwing up or passing out or both right there. On the other, how the hell did he sneak that gun into a courtroom?
They think he must have bypassed the detector. He was in and out so much, security maybe thought he was a lawyer.
This is the legal drama's version of a wizard did it, isn't it? But yeah, it turns out Bobby and Eugene hit the jackpot with their Hail Mary theory. The doctor had been the killer all along. And that's just how it ends. Man, not even with Allie telling him she's going to be glad to go back to representing guys who pretend to be gay so they can work in a bistro. What makes it weirder is that there was a scene with Allie and Billy 1 minute earlier that comes off as actually pretty powerful.
I am not going to apologize for not being up for this. Criminal law is...
I know.
It's not my world.
It's almost like David E. Kelly knew. He knew the people who watched Ally McBeal just might not be into something that takes itself as seriously as The Practice. And that's okay. And to be honest, that's the final saving grace for me in this second part. This crossover had its ups and downs for me, but I admit bias from not being that interested in a show like The Practice, where everything can be so dark and morbid. But it is nice that the creators showed that they can pull off both dark and morbid, along with crazy and humorous. And each has its own audience, as The Practice ultimately got more seasons, but Ally McBeal may still have the bigger cult following years later. Which just makes it funnier that after The Practice went full X-Files when Dylan McDermott left to be replaced by James Spader, only for that to be the death knell of the series, Kelly just created a whole new spin-off for Spader's character, which took the lunacy of Ally McBeal cranked up to 9,000. Yeah, I think you may have heard of that one. Dylan McDermott did return for the season 1 finale of Ally, likely just to make it clear that he wouldn't be back for good there, and there would be no romance between the two main characters. I mean, we had to keep the triangle between Ally, Billy, and Georgia going on forever, right? Oh, yeah. But believe me, this is far from the craziest crossover idea that actually made it onto the small screen. We'll be getting into that next time.